This program contains scenes of graphic violence that may be unsuitable for certain viewers. Parental discretion is advised. Author and adventurer Robert Young Pelton has dedicated his life to traveling to the world's most dangerous places and inserting himself into the front lines of war, all while dispensing advice to his viewers and readers on how to come back alive.
When I'm given the choice of doing something that seems foolhardy versus just risky, I'll skip the foolhardy and I'll go for the risky. And when I do the risky, I always look at what benefits there are in risking my life.
Yet when Pelton tries to cross the infamous Darien Gap from Panama to Colombia, he and his two young traveling companions are kidnapped by a Colombian paramilitary group.
I just said, hey, this looks like the place where, and all of a sudden, bang, you get ambushed.
It's not the first, and definitely not the last time that Robert Young Pelton has found himself traversing the planet along its razor's edge.
Well, I'm very interested in conflicts that are not covered by the media, for whatever reason, because it's too dangerous, too far away, it's too obscure, whatever. Because in those conflicts, you usually find the seeds of future conflicts. Every single trip I take and every single thing I do, hopefully educates me and then somebody else about how to deal with dangerous situations, how to deal with dangerous people.
The inside story of Robert Young Pelton's kidnap and his personal video diaries from the center of danger zones, beginning now on this episode of the world's most dangerous places. As the author of the world's most dangerous places, Robert Young Pelton has faced danger on numerous occasions. Over the years, Pelton has created a personal diary of his experience, written not on parchment as the old explorers may have done, but rather on thin strands of recording media, capturing the lives of some of the most unusual and extreme individuals in the world. And like the travelers of old, an adventure worth dying for is definitely one worth telling.
I seem to have been welcomed by more rebel and terrorist groups than any other person I know. They seem to have a sense of trust that I will tell the truth.
Pelton's curiosity with danger is just part and parcel of his life's journey, a journey that takes an unexpected detour in the dense jungles of Panama and will generate newspaper headlines throughout the U.S.
Well, my goal when I went to Panama and Colombia was to cross the Darien Gap. And the Darien Gap is the missing section of road between Alaska and Chile. And originally they wanted to build a road that connected the two continents together. And there was this little 90-mile gap called the Darien Gap, which is very pristine jungle and very rarely attempted by anybody because of the physical barriers, but also the presence of armed groups, specifically the left-wing rebels and the right-wing death squads.
On earlier trips, Pelton has witnessed firsthand the violent nature of life in Colombia, but his attraction to this country brings him back time and again.
I had 10 days in between TV shoots, and I thought, let's do it. But in order to add to it, I wanted to experience it through other people that were at my age when I wanted to attempt it, just to see whether I'd really come any distance in terms of my experience or skills or whatever. So I traveled it with two young 22-year-olds, and I found that I enjoyed that. I enjoyed seeing adventure and danger through the eyes of young people. But I also realized that just how easy it is to get killed when you're that naive and eager.
So what happened to you, Mark, last night?
Oh, I received a rather vicious welcome from a hound dog. It's not too bad, though.
Pelton met 22-year-old Mark Wedeven in a map store. A student from Washington State, Mark was born in Colombia, but as a child was adopted to an American family. This would be his entry back to his homeland. Meanwhile, Megan Smaker was an avid reader of Pelton's website and convinced him to take her along for the adventure. She's a firefighter with emergency medical training. Pelton thought she'd be an asset to the group. Although aware of the dangers that blanket the Darien Gap in Panama, Pelton begins his trip full of optimism.
I had wanted to do this when I was 19, but I was warned off. I was told all these tales of horror, and I figured, well, maybe I'll just go to a tropical island and go snorkeling. That seemed like a better idea than to hike through the jungle and get killed. And strangely enough, that's always sort of stuck in my mind is that one thing I never did.
While Robert heads off without fear, the Panamanian police have a different perspective.
The police kept saying to us, no, it's dangerous, you can't go there. They would tell our boatmen, if you take them to this place, we're going to arrest you. And so they basically were trying to keep us out of the gap. But every time we asked the police, well, give us a specific example of what has happened here, they said, well, we've never been there.
The area has been labeled dangerous because it's a staging area for two Colombian rebel groups operating along the border. The left-wing FARC and the AUC, a right-wing paramilitary group. The FARC are known to kidnap for ransom, while the AUC, the FARC's arch-enemy, have perpetrated brutal executions.
We spent the first 3 days going in circles on the river and getting nowhere. And then finally, after we were turned back by the ever-smiling but ever-unhelpful police, we were sent back to Boca, and where Victor came to our rescue and said, hey, I need a few bucks. The FARC are looking for some good men and women. So we're now carrying our stuff to the FARC for Victor so that he can buy a new motorboat, a launcher or something. So it's our second day. Now we're finally into jungle. You can see vines, you can see primary forest. It's not really thick, but it's kind of a dry. It's a dry season, so it's actually quite nice hiking. It's warm. But we still have a lot of time ahead of us. We still have about between 3 to 6 days of heading towards Colombia. And we'll see if we get
there. Negotiating the jungle paths became more difficult with each passing hour.
It seems very Indiana Jones to be using a machete to cut trail, but it ain't. It's pretty fatiguing.
There's a big
And you run a good chance of deflecting the machete and cutting your leg or doing something like that guy just did.
These comes up?
Yeah, he goes fine.
Because it was the dry season, fresh water was scarce. Pelton's native guides taught him that what man does not always bring, nature provides.
We had run out of water, and we had discovered that we could find water by drinking out of these vines called liana vines, and also by cutting green bamboo, and you'd have this section of bamboo that would be absolutely full of pure, clear water. So we learned how to survive in the jungle with nothing, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Refreshed, the group continues to press forward, unaware of the threat looming just ahead.
We managed to find a guide who showed us this path that had never been done before. It went between Indian villages. And we had to hook up with the Kuna Indians. And the Kuna Indians are completely self-sustaining, in the jungle.
Yet the Kuna were uncertain about Pelton and took him and his fellow travelers back to their community. It was the first time in almost 3 years white men had entered their village. Unsure of his intentions, Pelton is mistaken for a paramilitary soldier. But after assuring them that he was not, Pelton is invited to a tribal meeting where they must convince the chief to let them pass.
Originally we were told nobody leaves here, nobody comes in. This is the end of the road in Kuna, if you speak Kuna. In any case, we come up with plan B, and that is to go to a different town, another Kuna town, but on the Colombian side. It's going to require 14 hours of hiking over some pretty tough trails, high altitudes. But before we do that, we have to get the approval of the chief and Paya.
They had this huge village meeting where they discussed our fate. In other words, should we let these people stay? Should we let them go? Should we arrest them? Should we call the police and have them take us back? And they make these long, long speeches that go on for hours.
Pelton, always persuasive, convinces the tribe to allow them to pass.
We're in unknown territory. We're in a place that I guess the last person that passed this way was 3 years ago. So, and the route we're about to take has never been done before, so we're going to give it a shot.
Given a couple of village guides, the convoy begins to head toward the Panamanian-Colombian border. Rumors are spreading that rebel troops have been spotted in the area. Undaunted by the threat of contact, Pelton pushes on. Unknown by Pelton, paramilitary troops are making their way through the jungle, heading in their direction. The first sign that there's another group in the jungle are palm leaves laid down on the ground as makeshift beds, and a can sitting on a stick. Pelton now knows someone is close by, and soon finds out who.
The jungle just erupted in gunfire. Just like boom, 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 you know, it was automatic gunfire. And this went on for 6 minutes because I timed it at my watch. And there was a lot of shooting going on. It was basically, it sounded like an ambush to me based on my experience. I suddenly thought, why does this happen to me? Why am I all of a sudden in a dangerous place? You know, I'm here to go hiking and all of a sudden I'm in a war again. And at that point, I had to sort of refer back to my knowledge and my experience in warfare. And I suggested to the guide and the two 22-year-olds that we're going to walk into the ambush. Typically, ambushes are designed to drive you away from the sound of the gunfire. And then you either get driven into booby traps, like landmines, or you get driven into another ambush, which then kills you off. We're simply going to walk directly into this ambush. We're going to talk loudly in English, and when they attack us, we're going to yell, you know, Americans, don't shoot, don't shoot. We can do it in Spanish and English, but basically just make sure they know we're coming, and don't do anything silly. Keep your hands away from your body. Don't run, just stay there. And if they start firing at you, just drop to the ground, but keep yelling, you know. Stay down.
It worked. The group was face to face with the rebels and were then kidnapped. Adventurer and author of The World's Most Dangerous Places, Robert Young Pelton, has been kidnapped in the jungles of Panama by the AUC, a right-wing paramilitary group based in Colombia who are known for their brutal executions. Pelton and his two traveling companions had stumbled into the middle of a search and destroy mission aimed at FARC rebels supposedly hiding out in Panama. The AUC had killed 4 Kuna Indians they thought were FARC sympathizers.
They deal in executions, in very gory, almost cinematic executions with chainsaws and hammers and rocks and machetes. And they had very violently killed these people that we were with. So I didn't have any sympathy for them. You know, to me, they were basically death squads and terrorists.
Hello? Yes.
Linda Pelton receives word that her husband has been kidnapped.
At this point, my latest updates are that he's being held by the AUC. I have an awful lot of support from a lot of people who are calling and emailing and helping me stay grounded. I'm fine. I'm focusing positively on the Washington Post article.
So we're down here on the border at El Paso, which is one of the focal points on one of the world's largest borders. We're waiting for Robert to turn up. It's a bit concerning because Robert's not here.
James Brabazon is a Dangerous Places contributor who has traveled with Robert to dangerous places, most recently to the rebel war in Liberia. Brabazon flew in from London, England, to photograph Pelton's next World's Most Dangerous program, which was to investigate the war against terrorism from within the borders of the United States.
Robert was last heard of 2 weeks ago in Colombia, where he was on assignment. Now, Robert spends most of his time in the world's most dangerous places, not here in El Paso, but in places like Chechnya, Afghanistan, and Colombia. And it's very easy to forget that just because we see these places on TV doesn't mean they aren't incredibly dangerous. And every time Robert goes off an assignment, there is a very high possibility that he won't come back. So we hope that he's okay, and we see whether he turns up or not. But like I say, we're now 4 days waiting for him with absolutely no word.
Few things have deterred Pelton from his quest, which is to penetrate the least known corners of the world, to understand the motivations of the people who live there. His wife Linda stays in their home, hanging in balance on the side of a cliff overlooking the beaches of Los Angeles. For her, Robert's trip to the Darien Gap was not as frightening a prospect as some of Pelton's previous travels.
When he traveled to Chechnya, and I didn't hear from him for a week to 10 days, but there was absolutely no way of getting in touch. All I knew is he was in Chechnya and traveling in a very dangerous area.
In 1999, 2 years before there was a September 11th and Osama bin Laden became a household name, Russia had already experienced the deadly nature of jihad. For centuries, the Muslim nation of Chechnya had fought tooth and nail to claim its independence, but remained a story of little interest to Western media.
Well, I'm very interested in conflicts that are not covered by the media, for whatever reason, because it's too dangerous, too far away, it's too obscure, whatever. Because in those conflicts, you usually find the seeds of future conflicts.
The war in Chechnya was the type of conflict that drew Pelton's interest and was one of his most dangerous trips. Even before he started, he received some uncomfortable advice. When asked, a world assignment editor for the BBC tells Pelton that the British Home Office believes it's suicide to contemplate a trip to Chechnya. He lays out the threats, a serious risk of kidnapping for ransom, an intense battlefront situation. Pelton, undeterred, continues to make his plans. And then he gets a call from a man named Akil, who asks Pelton if he knows how to get into Chechnya. His curiosity is piqued. Pelton agrees to meet this new contact at his home in Tempe, Arizona.
I was contacted by an American who said he was very concerned because his wife was in Chechnya and could I help get her out. He said that he was an American, he was trained in the camps in Pakistan, he'd fought in a number of wars in Bosnia and Kashmir and a couple others, and could I go in and help bring his wife out? He wanted to go fight, and I said, okay, fine, well, I want to go there anyway, so let's go together, and then you can stay and I'll bring your wife out.
You don't enter war zones in a straight line. This is for practical and sometimes psychological reasons. And so the first stop on Pelton's itinerary would be London. Here, he would meet a contact who would determine if he was suitable to go behind enemy lines.
In the case of Chechnya, it's such a dangerous place in terms of people trying to kidnap you or kill you, that you have to be very careful who you were dealing with. And there was a French journalist who went through the exact same procedures I did and was kidnapped.
A devout Muslim, Akil was combat experienced. He passed muster easily with the contact. Pelton's passport to Chechnya was his book, The World's Most Dangerous Places. The contact had read the travel guide and listened to his pitch in London. By the end of the evening, the contact agreed to assist his entry into Chechnya. It was only the beginning of a month-long struggle to reach his objective. The next stop would be Turkey, to make a pact with a Chechen leader who might be able to provide him security for the trip.
I went to Istanbul, and they said, oh, if you want to meet the guy that's going to Chechnya, you have to go to this town called Duce. And that was a few days after a massive earthquake.
The earthquake killed over 20,000 people and destroyed countless homes. It was here, among the rubble, that Pelton needed to find the next contact in a chain of characters who worked the underground. A feared mafia head and hitman would be able to help Pelton thread his way through the back doors of Chechnya, if he believed in Pelton's intention. As Pelton toured the rubble of the Turkish earthquake, it made perfect sense that it would be here, surrounded by the sights and smell of death, that a trip to a killing zone might find approval.
They're not going to talk to you unless they feel that they're not going to be compromised or basically screwed by you being there.
Pelton left the rubble to meet with the contact and a small Chechnyan delegation who finally agreed to help him reach the next stage of his objective, but not without a warning.
They basically said, you understand that Chechnya is very dangerous? And I said, yes. They said, do you understand that you might die there? And I said, yes. And do you understand that we cannot protect you? And I said, yes. He said, okay, well then I'll give you only one guarantee, that you will not die until the last of my men has died. I thought, okay, it's not quite those pre-flight safety announcements, but it was better than saying you're on your own.
From Turkey, Pelton traveled to Tbilisi, the capital city of Georgia. After waiting another 5 days, he began the last leg of the trip in a broken-down Soviet vehicle that would take him over the mountains and into Chechnya. It was the onset of winter, and the trail was expected to be difficult.
We had to physically drive up into the mountains using the cars as snowplows. We got stuck many times. We came across refugees that were actually walking across the mountains. You know, their cars had run out of gas, or they'd been attacked and they fled from their cars. We're in a situation where every time a group of people assembled, we were bombed.
After bribes at checkpoints and navigating treacherous mountain roads, Pelton reaches a town at the edge of the Chechnyan border. His final goal, Chechnya's capital of Grozny, is now in sight. And after 3 weeks of travel and months of anticipation, Pelton is eager to carry on, but is held back by the real threat of Russian bombing raids.
What are we doing right now?
Making our plans. It's too dangerous to go right now, so we're gonna wait till sun sets. But if you accept the danger, if you're ready to be bombed, we can go right now.
Along the road to Grozny, Akil learns that his wife and child have left the city, but he and Pelton decide to press on to Grozny anyway.
Every single car that we've hired or used is broken, including this one, which broke down on the riverbed, and about 2 miles anyways from a battlefield. So we're fixing it this morning, but we can't travel during the day, so we'll wait till tonight, and then we'll see if we can make it to the border.
While waiting for the car to be fixed, Russian planes make their presence known.
We've been having bombing runs about every 15 minutes, and they range from high-level bombing to low-level bombing. And they're doing some shelling now, or maybe some tank firing. It's hard to say.
Using nightfall as cover, Pelton makes a mad dash by car into Grozny. It's a city eerily void of normal life. War has chased the populace out of the capital, leaving only a staunch band of rebels and people who are determined to stay in their home city or are too weak to leave.
The civilians were living in apartment buildings that were sagging, and they were hiding in basements. I mean, it was just horrific. And then every time they went out to shop in a marketplace, they would be attacked. And so the victims we saw were not soldiers fighting, they were bombing the civilians.
We're at the site of a 9-ton bomb that impacted in the central marketplace here. It left a crater that's about 20 feet deep, and you can see from the devastation around me that this has been bombed many times, not just once.
It's a beautiful house. Very nice.
Taken to a government safe house, Pelton's education in Chechnyan warfare begins immediately.
We're going to the scene of a bombing about 500 meters from where we're staying. They just dropped the bomb right in the center of the marketplace in Grozny. Was this one bomb?
Don't get too much.
Smoking hunks of metal and ramshackle huts are grim reminders that this once was a small marketplace populated by people trying to survive in the face of a desperate war.
They removed the wounded. We were about 500 meters away. Right now, we're the only journalists in Grozny in the world. There's only 3 of us. And for some reason, people don't want to come here to record what's going on here. We're under constant bombardment. And it's important to show people what's going on in a place like this because it's an obvious tactic of the Russians to scare people out of here, including journalists, using the threat of kidnapping or bombing.
Our government, and that's...
Pelton is taken to a group of victims of the bombing attack. A young girl's mother pleads with this American visitor, who they think can bring some relief to their lives.
There's no already economics. I have nothing. I'm not employed. I have no way.
It's my experience that we don't like to look at misery, but war is misery. The whole idea of war is to terrorize people and to kill people and to destroy infrastructure and to cause pain, suffering, and fear.
My brothers died. And their children, I'm staying with me right now. What can I do to them? What should I do to them, you say? So that's what we gain from this war.
Pelton is taken to a hospital, which is not a hospital per se, but rather a nursery in a dingy basement reached by subterranean halls.
It's a myth to think that humans are resilient. You know, it's very easy to wound them and to sicken them and to starve them and to kill them.
Stumbling into an operating room by accident, he's warned away. He backs up not from the warning, but from the sight of a young man with his face blown off, lying in front of him.
It was shocking to see that kind of carnage and that kind of assault on civilians, and nobody cared. There wasn't a single news organization that was interested in anything I had to say.
Over the next few days, Pelton explores Grozny with the help of his armed escort. They are eager to show him that it's not just the rebel fighters who are being bombarded in the city. It was like the end of the world. Among the burned-out apartment buildings, rusted red sewer and gas pipes are thrust skyward like civic artwork. In the gray devastation around her, a nicely made-up woman stands patiently at the side of the road, selling cigarettes.
She's living in that building.
Why is she still here?
Он inte där som du. Där är mitt gårdsjö. Det är ett gårdsjö.
Просто säg mitt glarushasho.
I'm just here because I live here.
Does she have many customers?
Client skulle. Not really big, but little.
How much money did she make today?
Hon var jättenäta. It's kind of 108 rubles.
108 rubles, huh?
Yes, $6.
What you will see is sort of the spirit of community, that when you put people with their backs against a wall, they form a very tight bond and a very strong belief in what they're doing.
Wanting to see action, Pelton convinces the rebel soldiers to take him to the town of Shali. This is the front line of the war in Chechnya.
Assalamu alaikum.
The war has been going on for years, but has recently intensified as Chechnyan rebels have taken the battle to Russian cities in the north, including Moscow. Soon after Pelton arrives at the front, it becomes too dangerous for him to stay.
Tanks coming this way. And they're actually cutting us off from where we just got in. So we're trying to get out of here as fast as we can.
Pelton's vehicle makes the slow retreat out of the area. They are a tempting target.
There are 2 divisions of Russian tanks coming this way, about 2 kilometers away, within easy range of us. The only thing that's really saving our bacon is that they really can't track this fast, although somebody might take a pot shot just for fun. There's about a dozen Chechen fighters, or mujahideen, preparing to face 2 divisions of Russian tanks. They don't really want to discuss the odds too much because they know they won't be coming home tomorrow, but they told us they will not let Shali fall to the Russians. Chances are it will fall, but there'll be another dozen Chechens behind them, and maybe a few thousand more.
Pelton considers himself a witness and religiously documents his travels on a small handheld computer. Back at the safe house, as he punches at tiny keys in his electronic diary, he is reconnected with his old traveling companion. Akil, separated from Pelton the moment they arrived in Grozny, finally finds the safe house. He tells Pelton that he had volunteered to join a kamikaze battalion of 16 men, holding off 5,000 Russians in an industrial area.
Oh, yeah.
They're killing everybody.
It's insane.
They're bombing everything, everyone. The fighters are dug in. The bombs aren't hurting the fighters. Hardly any fighters are being killed, which is good for us, but still, they're killing nothing but civilians.
The big news of the day is that the Russians had advanced within 2.5 kilometers of the safe house. Pelton's hosts wanted him out of the city before it fell. The next morning, Pelton prepares to leave. The cars are readied, and he and his guides begin their trek out of the city. Making it to the outskirts of town, they begin to run the Russian gauntlet.
We're doing a high-speed run and going about 120 kilometers an hour across a road that crosses the area that's shelled. And they just dropped a big bomb right over there, sending up a black cloud. And there's another one over there. And we're sort of running the gauntlet here, trying to get through.
And then, something ironic happens.
We ran out of gas in between the Russian front lines.
The Grozny is expected to fall today, and we're trying to make it out on the last remaining road. And apparently the Russians are inside Grozny now, and the fighting should begin. But we have to get out or else we'll spend the whole winter here.
For the moment, Pelton is a spectator on the racetrack to freedom. Soon, though, the car coughs to life, and they try once again to get out of Grozny. On a shortwave radio, reports bark that the Russians have the city surrounded. Pressing ahead, the car miraculously avoids